Like it or not, computer graphics in movies are here to stay. It's something that's become a staple of everything from gigantic multi-million-dollar blockbusters to smaller, independent films. For something so overwhelmingly common these days, you think it would have its beginnings in some massive studio film, but instead it began with the $15 million sci-fi adventure film, The Last Starfighter. Now, this wasn't the first movie to use computer graphics, but it was the first to use them for the vast majority of the effects in the film. No movie had ever done this before because computer technology just wasn't powerful enough. The concept for the film started with Jonathan Butel. He was working as a cab driver and writing in his spare time. One day on a lunch break, he stopped into a local arcade. At the time, he was reading The Once and Future King and thought it would be great to do a Sword in the Stone style story that revolved around video games. He wrote the script and sent it to Lorimar, who picked it up immediately. The studio recognized the rise in popularity of video games and thought this would definitely draw in that crowd. Nick Castle was brought in to direct. He had previously directed Tag the Assassination Game with Robert Carradine and Linda Hamilton. He was also the original Michael Myers in John Carpenter's Halloween. He went to film school with John Carpenter and Dan O'Bannon, and prior to Halloween, had a part in John Carpenter's first film, Dark Star. Dark Star used models, and Castle knew that method would be too expensive for what he had planned, so he started looking into alternatives. Back in 1978, Digital Productions did a test render of some X-Wings for Industrial Light and Magic. They liked it, but they decided to stick with models at the time. After seeing some of the computer animations from Digital Productions, Castle decided that that was the direction to go. Ron Cobb, who worked on Alien and Star Wars, designed the Gunstar ships as well as many of the other models for the film. He even wrote manuals on how each ship would work and all its various functions. Even though what they were doing had never been done before, they were fairly certain they could make it a reality. Still, it was very scary since they had millions of dollars riding on only their word. Video games at the time were still in their infancy, so they had to design the Starfighter game to be like what they thought games would look like in the future. Years later, with space shooters like Wing Commander, it proved they weren't too far off. The original script was a bit too basic, so Castle and Butel worked for the next 6 months to fine-tune it. In the first draft, it opened in the suburbs, but they rewrote it to be a trailer park. They felt that opening it in the suburbs would have too much of an E.T. vibe. The trailer park also allowed them to make the characters feel more like an extended family. While finishing the script, they did their best to avoid turning it into a Star Wars clone. Although with the basics of the story, a boy taken away from his home planet to become the Chosen One, it was proving difficult to avoid parallels. Because of his all-American good looks and charm, they hired Lance Guest to play Alex. Alex was named after the writer's son. Alex's brother Lewis was named after the director's son. Catherine Mary Stewart was hired to play the love interest Maggie. She and Guest hit it off almost immediately. Castle had a love of eccentric characters, so he pushed to hire Robert Preston to play Centauri. His character was written to be the Music Man in Space. Classic actor Dan O'Herlihy was brought in to play the alien Grig. He had never done a movie like this before, and agreed to come on because he loved the script. The effects team designed his mask to be thin enough to allow the actor to have a wide range of facial expressions. His look was a combination turtle-lizard. With Digital Productions continuing the computer work, they began filming a planned 40-day shoot. The movie was filmed on sets in California and on location in Canyon County, California. The first 2 weeks were all the trailer park scenes. Castle loved musicals. He described the beginning of the film as a musical without the music. The Starfighter logo was a variant on the Tactical Air Command. Robert Preston was the voice of the game. Centauri's car was designed to be a space DeLorean. It was an actual working car they drove around for its scenes, although they undercranked the camera to make it appear to move faster. The Rylos Command Center was the largest set in the film. The first Rylon Alex sees is Maggie Adelson, the producer's wife. The director's wife also plays one of the Rylons. Since Cobb worked on Alien, the Zandazan ship was a design taken from Alien that was never used in the film. Speaking of the Zandazan, I always wondered if their look inspired the cover of Release from Agony. The Kodan were designed to look satanic, right down to their red outfits, demonic faces, and horns. The brain melting scene was originally longer, showing the entire mask melting. They cut it shorter because they figured it wouldn't get through the MPAA, and they were aiming for a PG rating. The beta unit's transformation was done by putting a rubber mask over a dummy and blowing air into it. When the beta unit took off its head, they just had Guest put his head through a hole in the desk, and another actor lean his head forward to make him appear headless. While filming continued, the computer R&D was in full swing. They were writing the software as they went, and every day they learned and developed something new. The team was definitely pushing into uncharted territory. One of the big ones was that they were working on particles before anyone even conceived of building particle systems. They had fully designed 3D objects, which were much more elaborate than what was in Tron. They had fractal landscapes and 3D photorealistic objects. One of the most memorable scenes in the film was the Death Blossom. For the effect, they strapped Guest in a cage, locked a camera on him, and spun him around. For the explosions in the Kodan ship, they did the old Star Trek trick of having the actors flail around while they shook the camera.
Out! Auxiliary steering out! Defense!
At the end of the film, they built the Gunstar legs, but everything else was digital. The original ending they had planned was more like Star Wars' celebration ceremony, but they didn't have enough money to film it, so they commissioned a matte painting, shot the scene on a soundstage, and composited in the Gunstar. After the movie was done filming, post-work on the CG effects continued. The Frontier was the largest and most complicated digital shot. After a few months of post, the studio decided they wanted to have a test screening. The effects were nowhere near done, so they showed a print with placeholders, or vector graphics. While the audience laughed at the unfinished effects, they still liked the film, especially the scenes with the beta unit. Since they were such crowd pleasers, the studio gave them some additional funds to shoot some more beta unit scenes. Guest had just finished shooting another film that he cut his hair for, so they had to give him a wig for his scenes. The film got picked up by Universal for distribution. Castle wanted to use Rylos in the beginning instead of the Earth, but the studio wouldn't go for that. It was now 9 months before the film was set to hit theaters, and they ran into a major snag. They estimated the rendering of all the computer effects was going to take 17 months. Even though they were using a Cray XMP supercomputer, it just couldn't handle it fast enough. They had to go back to the drawing board. After a series of redesigns and dialing some things back to be not as complicated as they were able to get closer to their mark. The Fractal Landscapes were originally incredibly detailed, but they had to have their definition dialed back so they weren't as realistic as they would have been. The director joked the planets now look like melted ice cream. To save more time, they composited in the explosions rather than having them be digital. Digital Productions was able to deliver roughly 300 digital shots, which amounted to 27 minutes of effects, something that would have been impossible just a few years earlier. With the finished effects, the film was completed on time. It was released into theaters on July 13, 1984, and was a hit, pulling in $28 million. Audiences loved it, and critics were positive, but still labeled it a Star Wars knockoff. Although everyone was dazzled with the computer effects. There truly had been nothing like this before. Atari was working on a version of the Starfighter game for arcades. It was even mentioned in the credits. However, the cost of doing a fully 3D game was too expensive, and it was scrapped. They were also working on home versions for the 2600 and 5200, but because of the glut of licensed video games, the 2600 version was released as Solaris, and the 5200 version was released as Star Raiders 2. There was talk of a sequel over the 25th anniversary, but due to some rights issues, it lapsed into development hell and most likely won't ever happen. Although now there's a rumor that they're rebooting it as a TV series. Castle continued directing, and off the success of The Last Starfighter, Patel was able to direct his own movie, My Science Project, in 1985. Then he wrote, produced, and directed Theodore Rex, and hasn't worked since. The movie had some homages to The Wizard of Oz. Zur's big head was an homage to the wizard, and Maggie's Dorothy pigtails. The Last Starfighter is an absolute classic. The computer effects look dated now, but they were revolutionary at the time. Beyond that, it's just a great movie. The characters are all likable and supportive of each other. The story is just lighthearted enough, and has great moments like this.
Listen, Centauri, I'm not any of those guys. I'm a kid from a trailer park.
If that's what you think, then that's all you'll ever be.
Robert Preston was terrific as Centauri. It's a shame this was his last film. There's always been one thing that bothered me about the film. When Alex goes to Rylos, they put a universal translator on him so he can understand the aliens. However, when he returns to Earth, all the tenants of the trailer park can understand Grig, even though they aren't wearing the chip. Maybe space turtle lizards speak English. Or perhaps I'm overanalyzing this too much.
Tell him that you're me. Pretend.
Be quiet, Alex.
Sorry, Lois.